It's amazing to see so many of you here after last night. Because if you did it right, if you did it well, you're suffering. Are you suffering? We welcome you. Are you suffering with your Agile? Do you have a pain in your Agile? Any of you trying to be more Agile? Anybody? It's a wonderful pursuit, I think. Does anybody feel like sometimes you're going after something that's quite elusive and you wonder how to get there? So I envision the Agile landscape like this. It's a vast ocean, and there's some rough seas and some undertows and some unexpected things along the way, like an iceberg here or there that you didn't expect to run into. And there's maybe a little mist along the shore, and you can't really see where you're headed. But hopefully, you can see the peak, where you're going and where you want to go. And I hope you don't want to go to be Agile. Because being Agile is like saying, I buy into a philosophy, but I really don't know what that means. I think a lot of organizations, a lot of executives say, we're going Agile. A lot of development teams say, we've gone Agile. And I think, where did you go? I'm not sure I understand that. The whole organization has to embrace Agile. And it's not just the Agile Manifesto and a set of 12 principles that we follow like dogma. It has to be something that we internalize, so we have to have a goal in mind. In order to get to that peak, you have to crystallize, what does it mean to be Agile to you? And I think that using Stephen Covey's second habit of highly effective people is really appropriate here. As a matter of fact, I believe this is appropriate as a software development methodology. Start with the end in mind. It's hard to miss if you start out leading your projects with acceptance criteria. If you do that, you'll know when you get there. If you don't do that, you'll be stuck in that sea and not know when you've reached your destination. So I invoked the Forrest Gump version of this since Les invoked a box of chocolates yesterday. If you don't know where you're going, then you probably won't end up there. Even if you feel you know where you're going, does your Agile sometimes feel like this? You alone in a boat, all by your lonesome, the only tester, the only person focused on quality. Maybe after the development team is done with their sprint, they decide to give you some software. That's not Agile. That's not even Agile-ish. It's not even half Agile. It's just not Agile. If you're lonely until the end of a sprint, that's also pretty dicey Agile. So I don't want you to be lonely. I want you to make friends. I want you to collaborate. I want you to envision your team members as your fleet. And even if you get there, there's no guarantee that your Agile is going to be great, going to serve you. You could be very, very Agile, and it may not be serving you at all. It might look like this.
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high.
Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing.
You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards,
owls. These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
complexities of the digital economy.
Does it ever feel like that? Sometimes. A little scary, especially at the end where you all jump off the plane, right? And hope for the best. So here's the thing about the pursuit of Agile. It starts here. And there's a lot of talk in the industry about having an Agile mindset. Sounds great. Not really sure what that means. There's lots of presentations, lots of articles talking about what it means to be agile and have an agile mindset versus a traditional mindset. I'm not going to talk about those things. There's plenty of people talking about those things. I want to talk about how it starts for us from a testing perspective. What does it mean? And I remember the very first time I heard people talking about Agile and I was confused. What's this fancy new way of doing software development? Whatever do you mean? And they explained it to me and I went, sounds like everything I've ever done. Not really sure what the confusion is. You show up, you test some stuff, you ship it, hopefully it's good enough. Couldn't really understand what the challenge was. And I had a colleague in the industry, I affectionately called him my go-to agilista. Do you know what I mean by that? That's big A agile. That means someone who believes the dogma and pushes it. Someone who says, if you're not doing Agile the way, you shouldn't be doing it at all. And I don't buy into that. I'm little A agile. I believe we have to weave a solution together. However, there are people in the industry that I talk to that I don't agree with, and that's okay. So this colleague I met up with at a conference, and I said, Jonathan, you know, I've got all these questions from folks in classes about their Agile projects, and I really don't know how to answer them. I really don't understand the problems that they're having. Could maybe we talk about it? And he let out a big sigh, and he said, Dawn, I need a beer. So he goes and he gets a beer and we sit down and I'm concerned. I've never seen him like this at all. He's a very straight fellow. He's from Canada. That's our neighbor to the north in the US. And he sat down and he said, well, Dawn, I have this problem now. I'm post-Agile. Post-Agile, is that a new thing that I don't know about yet, because I don't know about a lot of things? And he said, well, you see, when I got into this space, I was enticed by the fact that there were rules and that it was rigid and that there was a way to do it, the way to do it. And I have discovered from working with client after client after client that there's many ways to do it, and I'm sad. And I went, I was post-Agile before it started. I'm good. I think that makes sense. I think that's exactly what it should be. But he drifted off and he went into the mobile space, and so I didn't have my go-to Agilista anymore. There are plenty of people who will fill the slot though. So one of the things that I witnessed over this many years of Agile transformations, implementation, people discovering Agile, people leaving Agile behind, people going post-Agile, is that it's not necessarily a comfortable place. And if you want to do things well, if you want to excel, if you commit to excellence, that also means you commit to being uncomfortable. And while a comfort zone is a human thing, it's natural for us to want to be comfortable. That is not where stuff grows. So if you want to go on this journey, you need to be willing to get uncomfortable. Is anybody here willing to get uncomfortable? I know you're probably already suffering, so, right? All right, thanks for the commitment. because here's how it's going to go. One of the most important things in pursuing agility in any context, it doesn't matter if you're V-model or waterfall or straight iterative or actually attempting to do some agile thing. Scrum, DAD, disciplined agile delivery, SAFe, whatever other mutation around agile that's not quite agile you might be using, straight Scrum, Kanban, anything like that. Those are all the trappings of agile. That doesn't really get at the heart of it. At the heart of it, we need to be sturdy, and we need to be brave, and we need to know where we're going. So I challenge you to think about being brave enough. Would you be brave enough to give up defects? I remember my first project as a software tester, official. I'd done lots of testing before that, but I was working in tech support. I had a background in programming as a DBA, as a sysadmin, and a job opened up in the QA group. And I knew I wanted to go down a development path, so I thought, I will apply for this job. And I got the job, I think, pretty much because I showed up. And then they said, come on over. So we had 2 fish bowls. Do you know what that is? So a glassed-in office, a big space, across from each other. The tech support area on one side, and the QA lab, 8 steps across the hallway. When I got there, bing, I was a software tester, because that's all I had to do. Just show up. I got no training, no coaching, no mentoring. The person who hired me evaporated when I showed up. I had 12 Unix boxes to keep me warm, but no colleagues. I was a giant test team of 1, with a giant development team of 1, with over 144,000 configurations to test, and receiving a build of software a day. I'm not very good at the math, but I don't think that math works at all. And one of the things, one of the tendencies, one of the habits that I became aware of was that I was completely obsessed with the bug. Every day I went in, and it was very, very important to me to find the bug, wherever it may be. And if I had to dig deep, if I had to reach very, very far, I was going to find it. And I would do anything, crazy things, really crazy things. And I wasn't even thwarted by the fact that many of the defects that I logged didn't get fixed. That didn't faze me at all. I kept looking for more. And if by the end of the day, I did not have a defect in hand to walk over to our one computer, we had a Mac. The Mac wasn't even attached to a network, it was attached to a printer. And that's where we had our defect tracking database. So everybody lined up at the end of the day to type in their defects, and then someone who cared would come and print them off. Really, really high tech. But if I didn't have a bug report to share at the end of the day, there was no way I was going home. Absolutely not. I was going to stay there until I made someone cry, sometimes myself. So I think equating our value with the bugs, with the defects, is dangerous. I think the setup in projects is kind of awkward. I mean, it's bad enough we're critiquing somebody else's work, but the only vehicle for feedback seems to be this thing called a bug report. Have you ever thought about that? It's quite narrow. And if we're really in the business of quality, which I'm not sure we always are, I joined the quality assurance group as a quality assurance engineer, and I'm quite sure we didn't assure anything, ever. We did some testing. We provided some feedback. Maybe we gave people some quality opportunities, but that was about it. One of the things that I think I could have done better, we could have done better as a team, is also providing information about quality. Most of the time, designers, developers wouldn't know quality if it hit them in the head. And if all we're giving them is feedback about what we don't like and what we don't want, how will they know what is good? Where is the vehicle for that? So I did it in the form of donuts. Somebody did a good job, have a donut. Really like that. Found a new build of software, started beating it up with my little attacks. Later on, James Whitaker published his book, How to Break Software, and he called them fault attacks. But many of them were things that I was doing, I'm sure you're doing, ways of breaking software. And if I pounded on a piece of software all day long and I couldn't make anything nasty crawl out, that developer deserves a dozen donuts. That's good stuff. I found robustness. I found stability. I found good. I need a way to share good. If a piece of software delights me, and very few pieces of software delight me, but most of them have to do with ordering food and having it delivered to me. I like food. So when they do food well, I'm good with that. But it's a really interesting correlation that the apps, especially mobile apps, that enable me to order food are delightful, easy to use, visually appealing. They warm my heart. Buy a developer a donut. And if you have a chance, tell them in a social situation, you know, that thing was really good. That thing really impressed me. You know what's not impressing me right now? This stuff over here. Be really cool if it looked like this. Now they have something to aim for. Just one thing that we could do if we let go of the defect a little bit. I think it's also potentially a missed opportunity to not study defects, to not actually look at how they got there, what they are. Do we like them or tolerate them? Or do we really not want them anywhere near our customers? What's the focus? So for those early few projects that I worked on, I was finding, as I said, tons of bugs that were not getting fixed. Because I was told things like, it functions as designed. I'm pretty sure that now means I don't like the design, but I don't even know how to have that conversation, other than, can I have my donut back? I don't like that. How about, a user would never do that? You've heard of that? I call that aunt. A user would never do that. What's hilarious to me about the people that say that is most of them have never met a user in their lives. So I have no idea why they're saying that. Here's what I think is really going on. James Bach frames it like this: no user we like would ever do that on purpose. I think that's not bad. Really, I think ultimately it's a confession. I did not code a safe pathway for anyone to do that, so they shouldn't. Therefore, no user will ever do that. I think that's what it is. For me, every time I hear that, I want to test it more. Then there's another one, TwinIP. That will never happen in production. We heard yesterday about the O-ring. I talk about the O-ring in my classes, and it was stated, it never gets that cold in Florida. Even though I grew up in the northeast of the US, I do now live in Florida, which is confusing to me. I never thought that would happen. I did not see that coming. But I live about 20 minutes south of Cape Canaveral, and I can see launches from my backyard. It's pretty cool. But it does get that cold in Florida. It really, really does. So saying something will never happen is confusing to me, because that's about half of the risk equation. The other half is what will happen if. And we need to have that conversation. And if we don't like the consequences, then we should make sure we are trying to avoid those particular bugs that will give us project pain. We can also use this information about bugs to funnel into and feed our test design activities. So let's design tests more efficiently and more effectively to target those things now that we know about them, instead of taking a random scattershot approach. The bugs can help us with that. Also, regression testing. Regression testing is a concern. We absolutely need to retest things. I'm not quite convinced we need to reuse the same test. I do think that there are several things we do need to retest, though. So when we're looking at the bugs that are out there, and especially the ones that we're going to let live, we might want to use this as a filter on our regression testing instead of putting every possible test we've ever created on the stack, with the intent of running it for the rest of our natural lives. So I think it can be used that way. That's just one. Test scripts. Are you brave enough to give up test scripts? And by that, I mean what Lloyd was talking about yesterday, the detailed step-by-step instruction for how to run a test. Now, here's what I've heard, or here's what a lot of people have told me. My boss, my management, my manager says we all must write test scripts with click, click, type detail so that if I get run over by a bus, anyone off the street can run my tests. Have you heard this? Justification? Anybody? I have a couple problems with that. One is someone believes I'm going to get run over by a bus. I have a problem with that. And the other is somebody thinks that anyone off the street can do my job. If I think about that for a second, I'm insulted. I'm perturbed. I'm annoyed. And I don't believe it for a second. That if I put navigational instructions in somebody's hands, that they are equivalent to me doing assessment with all of my experience and knowledge about the system, about defects, about users and usage, the technology stack, all of that stuff. I'm sorry. Testing is not about clicking buttons. Think about what's actually in your test cases. Is it information about clicking buttons? If it is, then I challenge you. I challenge you on the spot to weave some agility into that process. And realize that if you're doing the same thing the same way all the time, as Lloyd mentioned, you're going to miss things because now the bugs are hiding from you and you have zero chance of finding them. So what I hear when people say, we want these test scripts to be transferable, I understand that we need to sometimes capture information about testing and have it survive people leaving organizations or moving on to another project. We want to pass along the wisdom somehow. That's great. But when somebody says, we're going to put these step-by-step test scripts together so we can have people that don't know anything about our software do the testing, I feel panic, danger. If someone does not even know how to navigate our application, I do not want them anywhere near our software. So here's my rule of thumb. If you need a navigational test script, it's because you're testing navigation. And if you're not testing navigation, then you should think a little higher level and procedural. Like create an account, update an insurance policy, send out the monthly statement. Procedural, high level. And if somebody doesn't know how to do that, let's train them. And not train them with our test documentation, because that is an incredible burden to the work. And the time that it would take you to write a step-by-step test case, you could have created 10 5-minute video clips that show people how to navigate, what to evaluate, what bugs to look for, and have a resource that you can use over and over and over again to train people. I think there's a better way. And if it's a 5-minute video clip, how willing would you be to throw it away when it's not valid anymore and replace it with another 5-minute video clip? I think it's a very different situation when we actually have test cases. I think we're very tied to those things. So, something to consider. And how about test status reports? Every project manager on the planet is like the 4-year-old in the back seat on a road trip. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I remember the first time I got this question. Didn't get it quite like that. I was in the lab with my 12 Unix boxes to keep me warm. And some new guy I'd never seen before walks into the lab and he goes, "Hi." And I'm like, "Who are you?" And he says, I'm the new project manager." I'm like, "That's nice. What do you want?" And he goes, "I just wanted to see how it was going." I'm like, "Going fine. What do you want?" He goes, "I was wondering when it might be done." And I went, There's no done here. There will never be done. I have 144,000 configurations to test. I have 5 languages: English, French, German, Italian, Spanish. I don't even speak any of those, not even English very well. I have to test on multiple windowing systems with different scanner hardware. Are you kidding me, man? I'm getting a build a day. I will never be done. Goodbye. Next day, he comes back, a little more timid this time, and he asks the same question. I'm like, "Dude, don't you remember the conversation we had yesterday?" Still, the day after never is when it will be done. The third day, he came in and I went, "Dude, don't ask me that question. You're frustrating me. You're killing me, man. I got nothing. As far as I'm concerned, you can ship it whenever you want. I will be here until I'm dead. And then you can pry it out of my cold, dead hands and enjoy. Because I have no idea how to help you answer that question." Now, unfortunately for him, he was a shiny new MBA student, a master's in business administration, never worked on a project before. He still talks to me. I don't know why. I wasn't very nice. And I really didn't know what to do, but he made me feel very vulnerable. He made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing, because I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I didn't know how to help him. I didn't know how to answer his question, which was very, very frustrating. And if I had just thought about it a little bit, I would have tried to reach out and say, "What are you really trying to understand here?" Because as soon as we start talking about testing status, I'm here running tests every day. What status do you want? I will be here from the moment I get here until I leave at the end of the day or whenever I find a bug. That's kind of how it went. But in an agile context, if we start talking about test status as some sort of gateway thing, we've got an interesting problem. Because there really shouldn't be dev status and test status in Agile. There's, let's call it, story status, status of the software versus is the testing done. Now, if he had asked me a question like this, is the software ready? I might have responded differently. Ready for what? So I made a fatal error on that first project. I made lots of fatal errors on that first project. And it's not that I'm proud of them or anything, but they really helped me learn. They crystallized what I know today. It's a fabulous experience where I fell on my face endlessly. And this was one of those places. If he had said, is the software ready for our primary customer? I would have gone, primary customer, oh, yeah. I used to work in tech support. Our primary customer, who on planet Earth uses OCR, optical character recognition software, on Unix? That's nobody and the other nobody. So basically, it's the US government. The NSA, the DoD, and all three-letter agencies that shall not be named. And I knew that because I supported them. And whenever they had a problem with our product, they would call up, but not from their office, because their offices were in bunkers underground with no windows and no hard lines. There weren't even cell phones back then, so these people had to go to their homes and call us. And if we said something like, oh, could you send us the document you're having a problem with? After they stopped laughing, they would say, it's classified, of course. If anything wasn't working for them, we would have pursued it. We would have fixed it. If I had thought about the problem of finishing my testing differently, if I had thought about answering the question, is the software ready, and is the software ready for whom, I would have gone like an episode of Chopped and gone, I'm done, take it away. It's good enough. That day, the first day, he came in. But I didn't do that. It's easy to fall into the trap of testing too much or testing the wrong things when you don't know what that target is. What does the customer really need? So whether we're working on an agile project, a waterfall project, a V-model project, I believe that we can still strive to extract acceptance criteria, an understanding of what the customer really wants and really needs to accomplish their tasks. What are those tasks? How important are those tasks? How frequently are those tasks used? All of those things could help me refine my testing as well as the answers that I provide to my stakeholders that need to make decisions about projects. I could have been a better corporate citizen if I knew then what I know now. So this falls in line with one of the Agile principles. Instead of providing a test status, instead of looking at dev status, look at working software. Software was working when it came to me. I got a build today, but those builds were very, very thoroughly tested. The core piece of the OCR technology, neural net technology, AI technology, a 7-layer decision engine that decides whether this character is an O or a C or an A. It was ridiculous. And we had 8 weeks of automated regression tests that ran 24/7 unattended to test core recognition. By the time the software got to me, it was pretty much working. And that didn't even impress me. It didn't even come across my threshold because I was too busy looking for bugs. That's a mistake. Working software, primary measure of progress, very, very agile concept. So what does it take to truly be brave and truly embrace change? I think it's hard. I think it's hard to admit failure, mistakes, errors in judgment, to retract beliefs and opinions that you've held dear. I think that's hard. So what does it take to do it? I've discovered something that I really, really like. And so my advice is to start thinking liminally. What the heck did I just say? So I'm going to read this to you. This comes out of the foreword of a book called Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray. It says, liminal is a word That means boundary, doorway, or portal. Not this way or that, not the old way or the new way, but neither and both. A state of ambiguity or disorientation that precedes a breakthrough to a new kind of thinking, the space between. Liminal thinking is a kind of psychological agility. It starts here. That enables you to navigate these times of transition. It involves the ability to read your own beliefs and needs, and the ability to read others' beliefs and needs, and the habit of continually evaluating, validating, and changing beliefs in order to better meet needs. Liminal thinking. I think that gets at the core of it. I really do. So, are you ready to give up your beliefs? Every test case should be documented to within an inch of its life so that anyone off the street can run it. Do you believe that? Or have you just been brainwashed? Not sure. Do you have attitudes about testing? Testing is my job. I'm QA, no one else can do that. Ownership, it's dangerous. What are your habits? Looking too hard for bugs? Do you like your job title? Imagine it went away. Imagine everyone had the same job title. Horror. How about your performance appraisal? Can you imagine working on an agile team and not being called out as an individual at appraisal time? Can you imagine having one appraisal for the team? How would that change what you do every single day? How would it change how you interact with your teammates and colleagues? How you would make them accountable? How you would hold yourself accountable? I think that's a game changer. I don't think enough organizations or people are brave enough to do that. But if you were, this is the next step. Are you willing to give up ownership of quality? Because when we move into this new mindset, we realize that we were actually never the quality police in the first place. We tried to be and failed a lot. We need to do it together. We need shared ownership of quality. So in order to do that, you have to embrace it's not all you. I think that's hard. I think that's really hard. So I advocate for this, a transformation. A transformation not into someone that tells a team member what to do and how to do it and when to do it. Not that kind of leadership, but servant leadership. And if you're not familiar with servant leadership, it's all about enabling people. So coaching and mentoring around test techniques and practices. Become the quality coach, become the conscience of the project and help elevate other people's thinking about testing and quality little by little, every day. It needs to be a concerted effort. How can we accomplish this? By collaborating as frequently as possible. Maybe through things like paired testing, pairing with other testers, pairing with developers, pairing with product owners, project managers, customers, users, business analysts. It doesn't matter who the other person is. Pairing involves them working on the system, you observing, asking questions, you working on the system, them observing and asking questions. Through that kind of collaboration, we teach. We could mentor. We could work and do paired test design or crowd test design, like mob. You've heard of mob programming? How about mob test design? Let's get together and share what we know. I think we'll make it better. That servant leadership can show up in enabling peer reviews to be done well, and not just of tests, but maybe test design, maybe strategies, maybe plans, maybe even code, if we are suitably skilled. and share the techniques and practices that we've learned along the way. I know that when I started my first job, I didn't know anything. But I learned, and every time I learned something, I had some piece of information that would have been valuable to share, except that I was a giant test team of one, so I had no one to share with. So, how do we embrace this agility? How do we internalize it? Well, again, I think we have some challenges here, because if we self-identify with owning quality or owning responsibility for finding bugs and problems, for keeping the software safe, for keeping our users and customers safe, for keeping our projects safe, we're going to have an identity crisis when we get into an agile scenario. And here's the shift. The focus is on testing, not testers. So you might have heard the gossip from a few years ago. Test is dead. Did you hear this? Yeah, go look it up on the YouTubes. You'll find a Google Tech Talk, a GTAC talk by Alberto Savoia. He comes out on the little stage dressed as death, and he foretells that we're all going away. What he was really focused on there was the idea that the monolithic test team that does the bulk of their work at the end of the project is low value, and we know it. And it's got to die. It's got to change. It's got to shift. Extreme programming, ideologies and philosophies, agile principles, they help us with this shift. But this is it right here. It's a focus on testing, not on testers. So we're going to go through a period of transition while we're losing our sense of self and finding our new identity. I think that's going to be very challenging. So be strong, or be numb and hungover, whichever works for you. No walls. No wallflowers. Be collaborative relentlessly. Walking by, somebody's working on something, say, hey, what you doing? Oh, you're working on that? If I remember correctly, that takes in a first name. Yeah, that's what you're working on today? You know, I have this friend, her name is Jean Ann, and she has a space in her first name. You thought about how that might get handled? Because she's really tired of having Ann be her middle name, because it's not. Have a donut. Whatever it takes to start reaching out to people and understand what their work is, what are they doing, and what are your opportunities to collaborate. Make it happen. You make it happen. Think about being part of the team, not a tattletale. And I don't know if you have that term, but a tattler. Anybody have a brother, sister, you have some siblings, you remember how they always went to mom and blamed you? Right, that's a tattletale. So instead of calling other people out for their lack of quality, we share it. We share it as a team first. That's challenging, but we need to embrace it because we can't do it alone. Another thing that's important, agilistas and many other people in the industry have a philosophy about software development. And anything that you do that doesn't fall in line with what they believe is just wrong. And I think that's just bunk. I don't believe that at all. I have seen plenty of teams that are doing all the ceremonies. They're doing all the scrummy things. They're doing their stand-up. I even had a team who was doing, anybody familiar with yoga? They were doing planks on the floor during their stand-up meetings, which is a really difficult thing to do, and that keeps it short. That's pretty amazing, right? But doing the ceremony isn't necessarily getting at what it means to weave agility into your process. So be careful about just serving the agile gods and being proud of how agile you are because you're following the big A things. culture shift and transformation starts in the mind and in the heart. And if you don't want to change, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And you're going to get dragged on your face. So better to get a little in front of that. See it coming, plan for your opportunities, and make them happen from within. This is a strong statement, especially here, but I actually don't believe in best practices. I don't even have that term in my vocabulary at all. Here's what I have. I believe teams, people, organizations have default practices. And I believe default practices are there to keep us safe when we know nothing. But the more that we know, the more our practices become shackles. And the more complacent and sometimes lazy we become because we're not pursuing better. Why would we? We're already doing the best thing. There is no better. I think it's a bit of an oxymoron, and I don't think it serves us in the industry. I believe in continuous improvement. I believe that the practice that you decide to do today was built on all of the nasty things that happened before and know nothing about the future. Additionally, every time you implement a practice, it has a goal of targeting your intentions, but it will also create some side effects, like Hydra. Take off one head, two grow in its place. That can happen. So if you're not continuously striving to review, do retrospectives on your process, do a lessons learned activity, and see how it's working for you today, then I would challenge you and the team and say you might be stuck. You might be stuck in the best practice syndrome, and that's not very agile. Agile's about being responsive. So I put all these things together and think, this gives us a starting point. This gives us an opportunity to embark. So what's left? I'd like to throw down a challenge, if you're willing to accept it. I'd like you to write down or note one thing that you think needs to change in your organization to increase agility. Everybody thinking? Everybody got one? Got something? Okay. Now, own it. You saw it. You're it. The funny thing about what we see, sometimes it's unique to us. Sometimes we have special glasses, goggles that enable us to see things. I consider that our individual superpower. Don't waste it. You are unique and special with your experience, with your skill, and with your mental rigor and thought processes. You are unique. The opportunities that you see and the ways that you see them may be absolutely missing to everyone else. Don't lose the opportunity to be valuable. And so I'm going to challenge you to take action. Create a 5-minute talk. A lightning talk, a poster paper. Any of you guys familiar with lightning talks? Have you seen? Anybody? So I do them at certain conferences, and I can give you a quick example of one. So this is one of my favorite ones. I share it when people ask me about hiring testers. And I don't advocate for things like, look at all the skills and all the tools that people have on their resume. I never look at that. I would rather know about people's ability to learn and their motivation to learn. So I talk about the things that I simply cannot teach in the classroom, and I call these the attributes of a crack tester. So the first one is crack testers are curious. I can't teach curiosity. Either you got it or you don't. So please have it. The next one, resourceful. A crack tester needs to be able to find the answers to things, not have a question and be stuck for a day. So I think the best testers go off and solve problems. Go off and research things and get answers so they can make forward progress. That's huge to me. I used to call this one agile, and then that got very, very overused. So now I call it adaptable because things are always changing. We got to be ready for that. Then the next C, this one's easy. Be creative. Think out of the box. Now, some time ago, my mother taught me how to write backwards and upside down. I actually have no idea why, but there's one restaurant chain in the US where when you show up, they write on the paper on the table upside down, facing you, so you know their name. So I think my mother was actually preparing me for a career in food service. I don't think she really knew that, but this has been a very useful tool. I do a lot of testing, right to left, bottom to top, because I have a different perspective on things. It's very useful to me. Now, K, this was really, really challenging. K, I had a problem because I used to say my linchpins here were curiosity and bravery. Bravery, knightly. Right? Strong, sturdy, has a spine, can deliver bad news. Not necessarily with a smile, but can deliver bad news because they're strong enough to do it. They have an ethical core. They're committed. They're loyal. They're focused. Attributes of a crack tester. So if I was trying to guide somebody in hiring testers, I would share that. A little 5-minute elevator pitch or put a poster paper together. And I suggest that you deliver that little piece of wisdom as frequently as you can next week. And then the week after, for extra bonus donuts, try a new one every week. I believe you have enough to share, and I doubt very much that the well will ever empty. Share what you know. So, in kind of finishing up here, I want to draw your attention to this graphic that I started with at the beginning, talking about the Agile journey. This looks like a beautiful photograph, doesn't it? A lovely cold place, some iceberg, mountain. It's not a photograph at all. It's a painting. It's a painting by a woman named Zarina Foreman, and she actually does these paintings. They're big murals, they're wall-sized murals, with her hands, like finger painting. This is amazing to me. This is inspiring to me. So I thought I would share it with you. What can you create in 5 minutes a day? How can you get closer to your Agile destination? I believe with effort. A little focus, a little concerted effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for this fantastic presentation. We have a couple of minutes left for questions. There have been a large number of questions that have been raised during the presentation already, and we can see the most popular questions on the top. So the first one is, what is the best way to transfer know-how, knowledge, to teach new existing colleagues? What's your experience?
So I think it's important to take opportunities without making it seem like you're teaching someone. A lot of people don't want to be taught. So you have to know that there's kind of a natural resistance, and you don't want to come off as a know-it-all. I think it's important to strive to share something when the opportunity presents itself. So maybe you learn something at this conference that you want to share back at the office next week. So for a couple of days, spend a few minutes a day thinking about how you want to share that message. Make it natural, make it organic, make it something that you can weave into a conversation. Hey, when I was at the conference, there was a discussion about this, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Could we go get a coffee? Right? I think there's ways to do it. But if you say, come to my lunch and learn and I will share with you my infinite wisdom, I don't really know what kind of response you're going to get. So that's why I suggest lightning talks, maybe a little poster paper, something like that. Make it natural, weave it into your everyday, and ask people for their little nugget of wisdom. Get that conversation going both ways, be more collaborative, excel together. That's my idea.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Then the second most popular question about shared responsibility. How will you avoid the situation of, if it belongs to everyone, it belongs to no one? Have you ever experienced this?
It's very, very tricky to let go of responsibility for quality. However, we're putting something in its place, and we need to do that. We, the royal we, need to take ownership of that. So even in a waterfall project, I would say, look, we have these lovely requirements. Things like there needs to be a button on a screen with no description of the button at all. Sorry, can't test that. The system must be user-friendly. Sorry, that's ridiculous. I can't test that. The system must be fast. That's even sillier. I can't test that. So weaving in questions into that conversation to say, how will we know that we have the button, the usability, and the performance that we're looking for? So drawing that out at requirements time so that everyone is hearing it and everyone knows about it, I believe, gets us all connected to purpose early on in the project, instead of having requirements go in and then go through a process of transformation that I call the telephone game. Do y'all know about this? You whisper something in Lloyd's ear, and then he passes it along through all the people, and then it comes back out. So it went in a yellow highlighter, and it came out a banana. And then your tests don't match. And that's kind of how a waterfall project goes. So if we have the guideposts, if we have the acceptance criteria, I think we can get to that place. So that's how I treat that.
Thank you. There was a huge battle in the background regarding the priority of the questions. So probably the final one. What kind of trainings would you recommend for a tester these days for self-improvement?
That's a really tricky question to answer. I think it depends on where you're at. What do you feel you're challenged by? I know that in my career, some of the trainings that were the most valuable to me were the ones that I wasn't looking for and didn't want to be in. So how did I learn how to review requirements better? I went to a 5-day training class at Rational when I worked there on writing good requirements. And I thought I was going to be sticking pins in my eyes the whole time. And I was like, wow, there's actually a methodology behind this. And taking that course helped me understand what a good requirement is and how to make a bad one better. Never expected that, never saw it coming. So I think it's more important to be open to learning opportunities and maybe try some things that are in the soft skills area, maybe some technical things, maybe some agile trainings. I really think it depends on where you are at and what you feel you're being challenged by today, and what incremental change or piece of knowledge do you need to get to the next level for you. So please look inward. Not all the advertisements about trainings, that only gives you some information about what's available. Please pursue what's speaking to your heart and your soul, and it will be a much better endeavor.